Hello and welcome to the Womxn Show. I'm Lenina Rassool and today we are speaking about food security, urban agriculture and female entrepreneurship. After the break, we are going to be speaking to Renshia Manuel. Renshia started growing food at home for personal consumption as an unemployed mother of 4. It is now 7 years later and she's the CEO of Growbox, a company in Hanover Park that produces produce and sells it to the community. They do food growing workshops and they've also invented a Growbox, which is basically a garden in a box, meaning anyone, regardless of whether you have land, can have a food garden at their home. But before we speak to Renshia, we're going to have a look at a short video that shows how food poverty has affected people. Let's have a look.
If I was to ask you what hunger looks like in your areas, places you live, what would you say?
It looks like me. It doesn't really have a face. You can't tell who's hungry and who isn't because I think the large majority is hungry. Yeah, everyone is hungry, so there isn't really a specific face that you can pin to hunger.
So the right to food looks like having space and the agency to grow your own food. The right to food looks like having the autonomy to choose what you buy and what you eat every day. The right to food is having a wholesome, nutritious meal to eat every day for families, all households, and it's difficult to imagine in the state that we live in and the reality of things.
Mentally, I think that creates a ton of strain that no one really talks about. No one really talks about being hungry, not having enough food. And I think that's a feeling that people feel quite often, that there isn't enough food. I haven't, like there's times when I've thought, okay, what am I going to eat today? And my solution to not thinking about that is to stay constantly busy, to constantly be up to something. But then there comes a time when I can't even motivate myself to go beyond that. Yeah, I think psychologically it stagnates an entire population, which is constantly stay in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, you can't think beyond today. You can't think beyond the next 12 hours. Yeah, it's sort of like, yeah, it's hand to mouth.
What was around me. A lot of people lost their jobs, they lost their incomes, and then they found themselves faced with a whole lot. When I'm saying a whole lot is you would find that in a typical household, a father would get up and go to work. Maybe there are 2 or 3 children that would be at school the whole day. Suddenly everyone is at home. Suddenly there's a lot of mouths to be fed, and suddenly then the realization that we actually do not have enough food, because then you'd have to prepare more meals than you would normally. Sometimes in some households they don't even make breakfast, because the school's feeding scheme would provide breakfast and then they would provide lunch for the children. So many of them did not go and queue for the food. During the survey we would ask, do you know that there is a soup kitchen? Are you aware of a soup kitchen that is in the area? They would say yes. Do you go and queue or get food? They would say no. The reason for that was we'd found that there is a lot of stigma that is attached to being hungry. That is the norm in the communities that we live in. So imagine someone who will be working and providing and being able to buy food, suddenly finding themselves not having food and having to go queue. So they have this of what would people say.
My observation then comes very close to home, where we've seen the lived experience of people who've lost their jobs, who've really struggling to access food. You know, it's worse with this war in Ukraine that we're seeing, and all of a sudden these price rises going through the roof, you know.
I think a community nutritional hub is already a space. I mean, community kitchens currently are already a space whereby people go to receive food. There are emergency hub spots for food insecurity, for hunger, and many more interrelating social issues that are related to food insecurity and hunger.
Soup kitchens, popularly known as soup kitchens, but as Food Agency Cape Town, we started rethinking them as community kitchen based on the outcomes of the survey that we did, how they get stigmatized and how people don't feel comfortable to go in the kitchens. But if you think of a community kitchen, and our vision of a community kitchen is a space where people can go and not just get a plate of food, but can learn a skill, where we try to build sustainable and resilient communities. So you come into a kitchen, you volunteer your services. You can help with dishing up, you can help with cleaning up, for instance, or washing the dishes, and then you don't feel that you are just getting a plate of food. You feel that you have contributed towards that plate of food. In Ouagadougou, again, my appeal to other international organizations and local government is partner with local communities, dream together, plan together, find solutions together, and support community-led organizations. I believe that the solutions are within the communities.
I love to see young people take up space in these spaces, because young people come with a newness that is very oblivious to what the problem is, and sometimes that obliviousness feeds a lot into generating new ideas.
So yeah, the call to action would be people to be educated on food agency, on their rights to food, and to be enabled for them to practice their rights to food.
Welcome back. You're still watching The Womxn Show, and today we are speaking about food security, women in agriculture, and also female entrepreneurship. And I'm so excited because we have Renshia Manuel, CEO of Growbox, in studio. Renshia, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, Renshia, I'm so excited. You know, we're going to be speaking a bit about Growbox. We're going to be speaking a bit about food security. We're going to be speaking a bit about entrepreneurship. But before we go into sort of any of those, you know, you say on the website that your journey started as you were a mother of 4, you were unemployed, and you decided to start growing food at home, literally. And I just wanted to ask you to go into this conversation. There's a lot of women, there's a lot of families who are in that same situation. Can you just paint a picture for us what it was like as a mom of 4 being unemployed and not being able to provide?
Yeah, I was desperate times, honestly speaking, not knowing where your next meal is coming from, not being able to find work. I knew I was capable of working. I have a driver's license and I have a matric certificate, but it was just hard. I made a whole lot of copies of my CV and was walking around from company to company trying to find work. And it was a 2-year struggle. And yeah, it was desperate times, and I just didn't want to be another statistic of having to stand in a SASA line and waiting for a grant, because I really wanted to work. It's just the opportunities weren't out there. And it was because of that desperation that I started a food garden.
And so you're speaking about unemployment, and that's such a pertinent, long-standing pertinent issue, and we know that South Africa has such a high rate of unemployment. I've had quite a few people on the show who run food kitchens in certain areas now. Not just now. Food insecurity has been going on in South Africa for a long time. One of the things that often come through when we speak about food insecurity is also the emotional and psychological side of it and how it affects you. One of the things in communities especially is shame that comes through when you don't even have money for food. And was this a factor to you? What did that look like for you and your family also? Because the kids are going to school, right? The kids are in the community?
Yeah, I mean, it's a real shame, and you almost like you need help, but it's that shame of having to go to your neighbor one more time, having to go to family members one more time. Um, and it comes to a point where you almost, like you don't want to. You have to, but you don't want to because what is people gonna say? Um, that you can't provide for your children, or that guilt and the thing of oh, the people gonna you don't want to be a nuisance. That's the word I'm looking for. You don't want to be a nuisance to the next person and having to go and ask them again. um and my kids, they were, luckily the school was there at the time, so they'd be eating from the school feeding scheme. So breakfast and lunch was sorted, but then you have to make a plan for supper. um and then on weekends and school holidays it was really hard. So, and then you have to make a plan again. And there was at one stage where I walked from Manova Park to East River just to kind of get something to eat, from my mother. So yeah, it's hard. I was fortunate that I could come out of that situation, but there's still people that is in that cycle. And I kept having to remind myself that situation was temporary. It wasn't going to last forever, and we were going to get out of it because I knew I was capable of working. I just had to find something.
And I'm thinking how affirming, how a lot of people will be able to connect with that, not just like the lived experience of it, but also the feeling of it. And we had someone on the show the other day, actually, we were speaking about unemployment. And one of the things that really came up was um, how how it's difficult to find work, but the indignity of it lies in the perception of other people, almost like you don't want to work if you are not working for a long time. And is that some of the feelings that you had to work through during that time as well, when you have like long standing unemployment?
Yeah, I mean, people have this perception that you don't want to work, and it's not like you don't want to. I mean, like I said, I made loads of copies of my CV because I've got friends that work at primary school, so I had those connections. And I'd ask them, "Can you make me copies of my CV?" And then they help me out, and then having to walk through industrial areas and drop off CVs and going to shopping malls and things like that. Um, and then also people forget that the struggle for those unemployed people out there, because when you start at the job and you've been unemployed for a long time, you don't have nice clothes or the best shoes or something, and having to get a sponsor or someone for you to dress up every day, and then there's the added um stress of having to have taxi fare. um I know for me, even to get to an interview, I had an interview in observatory one time, and I didn't have taxi fare, so I walked from an overpark to a observatory. Even when I started, when Growbox was just an idea and I had classes in town, I had to attend the workshops. I'd walk from an overpark to town because I wanted to get to my workshop. So um yeah, that's the kind of decisions that one has to take, when you're working on a vision or something. Um, it's like, I want to do this, but I don't have the resources. So you kind of make a plan just to get by, just to get through it. Yeah.
I hear you. Wow, that's a lot, Renshia, and that's so inspiring. Just having done all of those things and being able to say that. I want to go then to this vision, and I want to say, so you're a brown woman from Anova Park, and you have this vision to create a nursery or to grow food or a garden or agricultural setup in Anova Park. And I want to know what that looked like, and also, what did the support look like? Did some people think you were crazy? Tell us about the start of this journey.
They still think I'm crazy. If you ask some of my family members what it is that I do, they say she grows stuff. They don't really know. Um, So yeah, what the support looks like, I think I've been very fortunate that I applied to a whole lot of free entrepreneurship programs. And along the way, I've been blessed with awesome mentors, awesome support system that's kind of helped me on this journey. When I started off, I knew nothing about business, absolutely nothing. I've always been a worker bee. Um, I mean, I've worked as a bar lady, I've worked as a driver, I've worked in retail, I've done every kind of industry, I think. So yeah, I've always been a worker bee and never been in this position before. So I knew that I needed some kind of support and training, and that's why I've applied to so many entrepreneurship programs along this journey. I always tell people that Google is my best friend, and that's what I did. I just kind of Googled the way there was programs, and I entered, and I was lucky and fortunate enough to have been accepted. And so I've kind of built my network. And so my support has grown, my support system has grown, and so I've kind of built the business, because when I started off, I didn't know how to pitch. I was the shy one in the corner, complete introvert, and I kind of had to um, teach myself everything that I know, build my self confidence to be able to stand and pitch in front of an auditorium of people or present my business plan to a CEO or to have that elevator pitch, as they call it, to a CEO of a company. So everything that I've done along this way, from how to draw up a budget, and how to work out our profits and everything I've learned from the various programs that I've been on. So yeah, I don't think I would have gotten this far without the support that I've gotten on this journey. It's been 7 years now, and 7 years of late night and sweat, um, and literally blood, sweat, and tears. Yeah, literally.
I can believe that. And 7 years is quite an accomplishment. Renshia, so you say, fine, you had no business experience when you started, but you knew about growing, right? Why gardening? I mean, besides the need that pushed you into turning into a business, what does growing mean to you? What is your history? Where did that knowledge come from?
My mother's family is from Goedverwag, which is a Moravian mission station near Piketberg. And my father's family is from Robertson. And school holidays that often send us off to family members. And our family members were laborers. So they were in the vineyards, in the orchards, and that was our school holidays. We were doing what they were doing. If it was pruning season, we'd be pruning. If it was harvesting season, we'd be harvesting. So that's kind of how I grew up in like a gardening agriculture type of environment. But as we get older, you finish high school, then it's time to work and all of that. So gardening kind of took a back burn until I was in that situation where I was unemployed and struggling to put food on the table. And then I just thought, what else is there to do? And it was out of that desperation that I started a food garden. And it was out of that food garden that Growbox was born, basically.
I mean, I love that. I love that so much. And I love that, I'm listening to the story and I'm thinking also, sometimes you don't have the resources or the money or, even business looks like it's supposed to be this big fancy thing that people are doing with like lots of tech resources around you. But actually, it is the idea. And I think I'm just imagining you need to have a certain type of belief in yourself and this idea to be able to push it forward. And I always think there are lots of people have these entrepreneurial ideas, but they think that they need a lot of things to start it. And I want to ask, like, what would you say to that, having grown this business out of just gardening at home?
I don't think you need to have a lot of things. I mean, start with what you have. And that is literally what I did. I started with what I had. If I had like I'd get a pumpkin, I'd dry out the pumpkin seeds, I started growing pumpkin. And then use what you have. The same with tomato or green peppers. You can save the seeds and grow the plants from there. And the same with Growbox. I literally started with a few cuttings from a few friends and family, and then I started growing. And then what I did was I wrote a very lovely letter to a whole lot of companies, and I basically asked them to believe in a dream that I had, and I told them the vision that I had for Growbox and what I'd like to achieve. And it was some phenomenal company managers who said, we, that we believe in this dream that you have, and they backed me. So that is literally how I started. One company donated a whole lot of compost, and then I started growing. And that cuttings that I had, we just multiplied them. And then my backyard got small with all the plants that I was growing, and we needed a bigger space. And then another company said, we'll sponsor you a tunnel. And that's how we moved to the premises where we are now. And ever since, things have just been growing. So I always tell people, start with what you have. You don't have to have a lot of things, but you have a few things. You start from there, and then you build a client base from there. You advertise from there. You take a whole lot of pictures, and you do your marketing. It's things will grow from there. At least if you have a proof of concept, and you can show people, that I've started, then people will believe in you. But if you just say, well, I have a dream, and you have got nothing to show for it, then someone's not going to believe you. But if you put your thoughts into actions and people see the actions that you've started, then they would 100% back you.
I love that. I mean, I think all of that is such great advice. Renshia, I want to ask, so there's an intersection between Growbox and food insecurity and even poverty and landlessness. Now, again, just coming back to what you said on your website, the idea for Growbox is also for people who don't have access to land to grow food, and this allows them, if you're living in, I don't know, even a flat, or I remember it said backyard dwelling or so forth, this allows you to have a garden in a really small contained space. Can you tell us about that?
Because of the area that I live in, Hanover Park, and there's so many other communities like this. Access to land is always a huge concern. I know when I started off, I couldn't find any land available, and that's why I asked the high school principal at the time if I could use this land. But I was fortunate. Many people are not so fortunate. They live in backyards, they live in flats. You know, they live in informal settlements where there is no land spaces available. And that is why I thought it was important to teach people how they can use everyday items as gardening tools or um, gardening mediums, let's put it that way. So I've got a Woolies basket here at the nursery that is full of celery and tomatoes. We have potatoes growing in bags right next to me right here. Vertical gardens, all types of DIY things. We've got potatoes growing in a sandbag. So for the schools, the feeding scheme, they prepared the same for the kids, and so they discarded the bag. I picked the bag up and I grew potatoes in it. So it's everyday things that our community can learn and implement for them to grow their own food, and that is the concept of Growbox. Yes, we are a seedling production nursery, so we grow the vegetable and the herb seedlings, and that is part of our business. But we also facilitate food gardening workshops. So we'll teach households how they can grow their own foods within the spaces that they have. We teach everything from soil catching, soil nutrition, how they can make their own compost, worm farming, and planting in various mediums that they can find all around them. You can recycle old 5-liter bottles, ice cream containers, old buckets, and grow food in almost any type of medium these days. And that is why it's so important to me that to show people that land is important, but you don't necessarily need land. If you got a few 10 kg sandbags, you can be growing enough potatoes right through the year. If you have old buckets, old tires, we use anything and everything to grow food in around here.
I mean, that's great. It's just the other day I was saying to my daughter, like, she must help me pull out the weeds like that were growing out of the pavement though. And she said, yeah, and then Mom, we can just plant it in a tire. And I thought, I thought it was so great that she knew that and that she knew that we could do that. You also do workshops with children, right?
Oh yeah, we love working with kids. Yeah, we have ECD centers coming through here. We have primary schools coming through here. Just this morning, one of the orphanages was asking us if we have space during the holidays for their kids to come through here. So yeah, we often have, we love working with kids. We like seeing the excitement in their eyes when they see how the tomatoes are growing, how the fruits are growing. And especially if they're with us for a time, like some of our programs are 6 months long with a particular group. So they are there from the beginning when they literally plant that seed all the way through to when they start harvesting. So it's just wonderful. They take a lot of pride and joy in the gardens and in the plants.
That is amazing. I actually do want to ask you more about how you work with kids with regard to gardening, but we need to take a short break. And then we will be back with more after this. Welcome back. You're still watching The Womxn Show, and we are speaking about food security. We are speaking about women in agriculture, and we were speaking about female entrepreneurship. And still with us in studio is Renshia Manuel, who is the CEO. Renshia Manuel, he's the CEO of Growbox. And Renshia, before the break, you were speaking about how you went from starting a food garden at home for personal consumption to growing that into a business called Growbox. And so I wanted to come in and sort of speak to you about also, then entering the agricultural sector. And so we know women in agriculture is endorsed, it is encouraged, but it's still a male-dominated sector. What has your experience been sort of navigating this space?
Yeah, it's most definitely a male-dominated sector, and also for let's say in our area, it's more of the elderly male. So for women, this you don't see a lot of women in our sector. And if you do see women, it's mostly the gogos, not really my age or the younger generation. I'm not that young anymore, but the younger generation. Not so much young women. And also the opportunities within the city centers. I know I was really struggling to find agricultural courses. That's more prominent in the rural areas, the Boland areas, not so much in the inner city areas. You don't find a lot of agricultural courses around here, and especially if I'm thinking of accredited agricultural courses. Yeah, there's soft skill courses and things like that. But I'm talking about NQF level 2, 3, and so on. Not a lot of agricultural courses within the CBD areas or the metropole areas. Let's say it like that.
So that's quite interesting because, one of the things that we've been speaking about on the show this year specifically, we've been looking at, I think it's, after COVID especially, looking at the topics of food insecurity and the topics of food poverty. And so this question just about, I'm constantly thinking, how can we have such high levels of food poverty when we live on an earth where you can literally grow your own food, right? So when one of the terms that jumped out at me on your website was urban agriculture. And it sounds so fancy, right? So when you see urban agriculture, it's usually like on a really fancy website, or they're talking about these roof gardens on top of like office buildings. But I wanted to ask you to sort of define that for us. And Growbox is part of a bigger vision, it says, for urban agriculture. What does that look like for communities?
Urban agriculture is basically just gardens within a busy city center or in our neighborhoods, everywhere where the spaces are tarred over, have paving, we want to put gardens there. So turning urban spaces up on walls against your vibe, we want to turn it into gardens. So basically that is what urban agriculture means to me. Turning our urban spaces into green spaces and food gardens. But also it's what is the thing I'm looking for? We want to make agriculture fun and, exciting again, and geared more towards the younger generation and not so much the old stuff anymore. That's why we're into vertical gardens, hydroponics, aquaponics, all those lovely terms that people like to use. Yeah, and make it fun and exciting so the youth can also be excited by it and want to pursue it.
I love that. What are people's so let's say what has the community's reaction been to urban agriculture, to growing gardens at home? Um, would you find there was resistance to it initially? You're talking about making it fun. Did people think growing food might be too much work? There's a broader narrative where we think about our colonial sort of history, where the knowledge of growing has been lost over the years. And so I know with some groups that I've spoken to who have said, this is in our ancestry, and now we've had to come into a space where we have to relearn these things. But also, I think part of it is the perception of growing your own food is seen. Yeah, you're seen differently. What has been the reactions to people when you talk about sort of urban agriculture and growing food at home and growing your own food?
Yeah. So now people love the idea of it, but they don't like it so much because it takes so long. And that is the thing, because in this fast-paced world, people want things instantly. And that's why online things are a trend and everything is a trend because it's instant, it's fast, you don't have to wait long. And unfortunately, in our communities, on the flats, people also, they want their food now. They don't want to wait 3 months for cabbage to grow. They'd rather stand in a line and get an instant a meal each night than have to work. So it's having to change mindsets. And I think that is the biggest challenge, having to change mindset and making them see the nutritional value of growing their own food, the value of looking after your environment, the value of that therapy that they get while they're working in the garden, the value of community cohesion, helping your neighbor, the value of getting kids involved and making it a family event. It's having to reestablish all those values within our communities so that it can be a lasting project and not a once-off project. And I think that is my pet peeve with agriculture. I hate it when big companies come and turn it into a once-off project and then they leave. And then what happens to the garden?
Yeah.
They, there's nothing in place after the first harvest or the second harvest and so on, and making it a sustainable project. And then that's kind of what we're working towards, is making all these gardens a sustainable project. And that's why we're working with the young ones, the kids, and getting them excited so that as they grow up, they can instill what they've learned into the next generation and get people excited about growing again. And yeah, because gardening is very therapeutic, and especially in our communities where there's such a lot of violence, there's such a lot of social ills, there's such a lot going on in these kids' households, that it's nice to find a nice green space, and just for them to be in that type of environment where they can just detach and, feel at peace. So, yeah, there's a lot we're working towards. We're doing it one garden at a time. There's a lot to unpack here.
I actually wanted to follow up with that and speak about sort of some of the therapeutic benefits, because it's known. Again, we're seeing a lot of like literature coming out now, even on social media and so forth, right? Is about the value and the benefit and the real physical, bodily, somatic benefit of like working with the earth, of like being in nature. And so even the Growbox is positioned to like grow your own food and grow your own food garden, but there are real benefits to like really digging your hands into that soil, right? Into like being around plants, being around nature. I think I saw in an article where someone interviewed you, you spoke about it relieves, it affects like anger, it relieves anger, it becomes an outlet for kids, it calms the spirit. So I just want to ask from your perspective in terms of these benefits, and are these benefits some of the things that you have seen as you work with communities, as you do the workshops, as you watch kids watching their vegetables grow? Do you see a change?
Oh yes, no, most definitely. We see that change. You know, you see the light come back into their eyes again and that excitement. Um, Especially when they're seeing their plants grow. They have so much pride, you know. It's a small plant that might seem insignificant to some, but to that child it's everything because they nurtured that seed and they watered it and it's growing and it's getting a few leaves and it's growing taller and then they put up a stick next to it to kind of support it and then they see the fruits coming up so they get very excited. There's some kids that came to me because they were on detention and they were suspended from school, and then when they get back to school they want to come back to me because they want to go to the garden, and then they say, Miss, but it's fine, you know, I'll stay out of school. I say, you can't stay out of school. You have to go to school. um so yeah, they just want to come back and they want to be in that area. And sometimes it's very hard. They don't understand. Look, it's funny that the school system is not for everyone. Not all kids can cope academically, and now they have those external factors at home, whatever the issues are at home, and now they come into the school environment and they are pushed towards academics, when that is not how they are programmed. So when they get their hands dirty in the gardens, when they're growing, when they're planting, we don't put pressure on them. There's no stress. They can work at their own pace, and you'll see that they actually get a lot more done without that added pressure on them. And they are in their own zone and they are happy and they are smiling. You know, they when they start off, they come to us all angry and they've got all this built up rage and things. And after a few weeks, ah man, they're the sweetest things. They'll come in and they'll hug and they'll be all excited and they'll tell stories. I've literally seen the change. So yeah, if we can establish a lot more greener spaces, garden centers, spaces for kids, I think we can do a lot of change with that, most definitely. And especially if we're working with the social workers and so on, I think a lot can be done with it. I know in the more leafier areas, they have horse therapy and they have all these animal therapies. Unfortunately, we don't have horses, but we can implement gardens, and I think that can change it, the kids, you know, from that type of position. I think it will help them a real lot if we have a lot more places like this around.
I mean, that sounds so great. I want to ask Renshia, you also speak about, shifting the mindset about where food comes from. So this was something that I also picked up. And I think that we are seeing, if we think now about our current levels of inflation and how the cost of food goes up and down, and more recently up and up, and the cost of vegetables specifically, people are starting to question around like where the food comes from. Ultimately, it's a business. Ultimately, what do you mean when you say we need to shift the mindset about where food comes from, and how should people start thinking about that?
You talked about the economics of food. I don't know if you remember a few weeks ago, the cost of potatoes went sky high and everybody was complaining.
That's exactly what
It's
I'm talking about, actually.
Yes, yes. So things like that, in the Western Cape, it's not really potato season here. Potatoes are still growing. So the potatoes is being transported from our neighboring provinces. But there was heavy rain and those harvests were destroyed because of weather conditions. And that's what pushed up the potato prices, because the potatoes that were available obviously it needs to feed a whole lot of people. So the big industries, they kind of have the monopoly over the prices, so they pushed it up. And then obviously the poorest of the poor cannot afford those exuberant prices. And it's also for you and me to know, from a health point of view, where our food comes from, because you don't know the chemicals that was sprayed on those potatoes that cost you 200 rand a pocket. You don't know how the land was treated and what chemicals was used there. You don't know what pesticides were sprayed on those things. So knowing where your food comes from is very important for the nutritional value of that food. Was those things grown organically? What kind of pest control was used on there? what kind of how do they treat the land, all those things, because we hear of all these cancers coming up and all these illnesses and chronic illnesses, and it's got a lot to do with what we consume. And if you eat a meal once off, obviously you're not going to feel it, but it's a build up and a build up and a build up of all these chemicals that we are eating and everything that we are consuming, that is creating all these chronic illnesses within us. And we see the consequences of that at the clinics and at the health care centers all across the Cape Plateau and in the poorer areas. So many people are diabetics, they are on chronic medication, it's high blood pressure, it's this, it's that. And a lot of that can be changed by just having a healthy diet or access to healthy food on a regular basis. So all this is very important. And our poor communities don't have access to food or good organic healthy food on a regular basis. That social grant that they're living on is only enough to feed them, let's say, for the first week. For the rest of the month, they have to make a plan. That social grant is not enough to sustain a family for an entire month. So our communities need additional food resources. And often the food that they sell in our communities is expired, it's old, it's outdated. You find the food at the flea markets, people think, oh, it's cheap, yogurt is on special, this is on special, that is on special. But those expired goods are not always good for you. Yeah, so I'm not going to get into the technical things of things. But yeah, I think it's important that our communities know where the food comes from. Grow local, support local. I believe in that concept of food grown in our communities for our communities.
I love all of that. I want to ask what might be a really stupid question. But when I go to the shop, right, and I see organic on the thing, right, on the label, it immediately pushes up the price of that food.
Yeah.
And I just want to know, if I'm growing my own food, does that mean the food is organic? I don't quite even know what the difference is.
Yeah, no, most definitely. You can make your own compost at home and use that as a nutritional feed for whatever you're growing. You can use your banana peels and use that as a fertilizer. You can make your own worm tea and use that as a fertilizer. You'll be growing organic. All of us can grow organic at home, but that's what the supermarkets do. They put that organic label on there, and the price is 4 times more expensive. And we're growing the same thing on our urban farm. We're growing the same thing at our nurseries. We're growing the same thing at all the gardens that we implement. It's exactly the same thing, except theirs cost 4 or 5 times more than ours do.
And so it's just actually, I mean, coming to definition, it means it's growing more naturally, right? With less chemicals or no chemicals.
Yes. No, organic is basically using plants or anything without any chemical treatment to boost the growth of a plant. So yeah, no, it's we most of us are growing organic, yeah. In our urban gardens around here, yes. So yeah, it's just we don't market it or sell it for 4 times.
I think it's so important to make the distinction, because sometimes if you don't know, really, you'll go into the shop and we have a perception also of something is more expensive, so it must be, I don't know, like more in a way that we sort of can't we can't imagine. We just know that it's more expensive, right? So Renshia, we have about 2 minutes left. I want to just ask you, so you do food gardening workshops, you sell produce, people can come to your nursery, they can buy vegetables, also food scraping services. Just quickly, like, how do we get hold of you? How do we access your services? How do we attend the workshops or buy a Growbox?
Okay. Yeah. So if I had to summarize everything quickly, so like I said, we're a wholesale seedling production nursery. We grow the vegetable and the herb seedlings. So you can visit the nursery at any time. We have organic pest control, we sell seeds. What else do we sell? We have organic fertilizers. Or if you just want to buy seedlings for your garden, you're happy to come around. Or if you want a grow box, grow boxes are basically a garden in a box. So they different types of gardens. We have a stir-fry garden, a Mediterranean garden, a salad garden. So all you have to do is maintain and harvest. And yeah, those are the things that we sell at the nursery. We also have an urban farm there. So we established the urban farm during lockdown. So we were growing fresh organic food for our communities during lockdown. And right now, the urban farm is growing all kinds of goodies for the summer. So you're happy to come around whenever and just harvest. I think we have tomatoes available now, cucumbers, and lots of leafy greens. So it's basically like a strawberry farm concept. You come around, you say what you want, and then the guys will harvest it for you. And then you take your fresh produce home. And then we also do foodscaping. So it's kind of like landscaping except with food. So if you have a barren piece of land at home that you don't want to get your hands dirty with, we'll convert that into a food garden for you. So we do all the dirty work so that our clients wouldn't have to. And then we facilitate food gardening workshops. So we'll often post the workshops on Facebook or Instagram. And then we have workshops right through the year. We try.
Yeah, sorry, we have to go. Can you just, website address is? Website address?
www.growboxnursery.co.za, Facebook at Growbox Nursery, Instagram at Growbox_nursery.
Fantastic. Renshia, thank you so much for joining us and for speaking about this important topic.
Pleasure. Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show.
Okay, we are going to take a short break, but we'll be back with more after this. Welcome back. You're still watching The Womxn Show, and we've been having a great conversation about food security, urban agriculture, and women in entrepreneurship. Now, I don't know about you, but I am super inspired by Renshia's journey as she has grown Growbox. Before we go, we are going to have a look at a short video about women in agriculture. Let's have a look.
Para nosotras, la construcción de la soberanía alimentaria pasa por el despertar del sujeto político de la mujer. Para eso, hacemos la formación política necesaria para construir un mundo nuevo.
Women face a lot of complex challenges around the world, in Africa and other places. And this is as a result of patriarchal system of domination, capitalism, discrimination, neoliberalism that's continued to put women on the low side and disregard them, undermine their rights at the benefit of transnational companies who continue to make profits for their own private pockets with produce to feed international markets.
I think it's very important that to attain any sort of justice, be it environmental justice, economic justice, social justice, one has to dismantle the unequal power structures. And that is why the work of gender justice and dismantling patriarchy is so important and is so powerful.
En la mayoría de los países las mujeres asumen el rol principal de cuidadoras, un trabajo totalmente invisibilizado y que además se considera que no necesita ser remunerado. Pero además del trabajo de cuidadoras, las mujeres constituyen el 43% de la mano de obra agrícola y su papel se centra sobre todo en la producción de alimentos para consumo familiar más que en las exportaciones. En este sentido, sufren infinidad de discriminaciones que van desde la tenencia de la tierra hasta los salarios y que pasan también por una falta de acceso tanto a ayudas estatales como a la tecnología necesaria.
Una de las demandas centrales, ¿verdad? Que todo este análisis, o sea, el aporte que hacemos las mujeres a todo el proceso de sustento de la vida, de las economías de un país, sean considerados como parte del análisis que se hace a nivel de nuestros países, ¿verdad? Del análisis económico que se hace en nuestros países, porque es fundamental cómo se protege hasta ahorita nuestros bienes como la semilla, que es un patrimonio cultural, que es en realidad la que sustenta la vida, cómo hemos cuidado la semilla, cómo hemos cuidado los territorios, cómo hemos cuidado los bienes tan fundamentales como el agua, como la tierra, y entonces que eso es algo que debe de ser considerado, ¿verdad?, como parte de toda una visión y pasa por esa discusión en términos de cómo nosotros queremos, ¿verdad?, que sea considerado el aporte de las mujeres a todo el proceso de desarrollo, de sustentabilidad de nuestros territorios y de nuestras naciones.
That was a short video on women in agriculture. And that's all we have for today. Thank you for joining us. I'm Lenina Rassool. Goodbye.